Good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Pugh of the Home Bible College. It's April the 13th today, and it's 1 Samuel and chapter 26, where we're reading. Ziphah came to Saul in Gibeah, saying, "Does David hide himself in the hill of Hashelah, which is before Jeshurun?" Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 chosen men of Israel to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul pitched in the hill of Hashelah, which is before Jeshurun, by the way, and David abode in the wilderness. And he saw that Saul was come after him in the wilderness. So David sent out spies and understood that Saul was actually indeed coming. So David goes down into the camp of Saul, and they come by night, and they find Saul sleeping in a trench with his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster, but Abner and the people lay around him fast asleep. Then said Abishai to David, "God hath delivered thine enemy into thy hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once. I will not smite him a second time." And David said to Abishai, "Destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" David said, "Therefore, as the Lord liveth, the Lord will smite him, for his day shall come to die, and he shall descend into battle and perish. And the Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take now the spear at his bolster and the cruse of water, and let us go." So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they got away. No man saw it, and no man knew it or awoke. They were all asleep, because a deep sleep from the Lord was fallen upon them. See, the Lord was working. It wasn't just David and his skill and his wisdom. It was God that was working with David. David went over to the other side and stood on the top of a hill a great way off, with a great space between them. And David cried to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, "Answerest thou not, Abner?" Then Abner answered and said, "Who art thou that cries against the king?" And David said to Abner, "Art thou a valiant man? Who art thou that criest to the king?" He says, "Who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For they came out of the people to destroy the king thy lord. This thing was not good that thou hast done. As the Lord liveth, ye are worthy to die, because ye have not kept your master safe. The Lord's anointed, now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster." And Saul knew David's voice and said, "Is this thy voice, my son David?" And David said, "It is my voice, my lord, O king." And he said, "Wherefore does my lord pursue after his servant? For what have I done? What evil is in my hand? Now therefore I pray thee, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If the Lord has stirred thee up against me, let me accept an offering. But if it be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, Go serve other gods. Now therefore let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of the Lord, for the king of Israel is come out to seek a flea, as when one does hunt a partridge in the mountains." Then said Saul, "I have sinned. Return, my son David. I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day." You see, David had saved the life of Saul. When God had given to David Saul into his hands, he'd had mercy, and he had restrained from killing him. And Saul says this in verse 21, it's my password for today, a great warning to all men at all times. He says, "I have played the fool and erred exceedingly." You see, Saul was a great man, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But great men can do greatly foolish things, and they can make very great mistakes. And so this is a general warning to all men. David answered and said, "Behold, the king's spear. Let one of your young men come over and fetch it. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness, for the Lord delivered me into thy hand today. But I would not stretch forth thy hand against the Lord's anointed. And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulations." Then Saul said to David, "Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt do great things, and also thou wilt still prevail." So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. And yet, chapter 27, it says, "And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me, that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines." You see, no matter how many times Saul repented, when an evil spirit came upon him, this isn't a demon, by the way, this is just a bad temper. He just had a bad temper on him. He says, when an evil spirit comes upon him, then he'll just kill me. So David escapes to Gash, and he dwells with Achish of Gath, and and he takes with him his wives. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and Saul sought him no more. You know that Saul did not want to go up against Achish looking for David. And David said to Achish, "If I have now found grace in thine eyes, let me now have a place or some town in the country where I may dwell there. For why would thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? I'm not worthy," he says, "to be in your royal city." David is playing his cards close to his chest, isn't he? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day, wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. So at the day when this was being written, Ziklag was a city that belonged to the kings of Judah, even in the middle of the Philistines. And when the time came, David went into the country of and at the time David dwelt in the country of the Philistines for 1 year and 4 months. And at that time, David's men often went up to the Geshurites and the Gezerites and the Amalekites, and he would have battles with them, but he wouldn't leave any of the people alive to be able to tell the story of who destroyed them. And all that time, Achish thought that David had just gone off for a pleasant walk, a pleasant bit of exercise. He didn't realize that David, in the midst of him, was destroying the enemies of God. Now, chapter 28 begins, it says, "And it came to pass in those days that the Philistines gathered their armies together to warfare, to fight with Israel. And Achish said to David, Knowest thou assuredly that thou shalt go with me to battle, thou and thy men?" Now, this was going to be difficult for David. What was he going to say now? Well, David says, "Surely thou shalt know what thy servant can do." And Achish said to David, "Therefore I will make him keeper of my house forever." And you see, this Philistine didn't realize that the one that was in their midst was his sworn enemy. And when Samuel was dead, and all Israel lamented after him, and buried him in Ramah, even his own city, and Saul had put away all those that had familiar spirits and wizards out of the land. Now, so what were the familiar spirits and the wizards? Well, those that had familiar spirits were mediums. Now, we learn from this passage something very significant. A medium was not someone that dealt with demons. A medium was somebody that dealt with the dead. They communicated with the dead. And that's what a wizard or those that had familiar spirits were able to do. This was an exceedingly wicked thing to do. It was something totally forbidden in Israel. And Saul had put away from the land all those that had familiar spirits or were wizards. The Philistines gathered themselves together and came and pitched in Shunem, and Saul gathered all Israel together, and they pitched in Gilboa. And when Saul saw the host of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart greatly trembled. And Saul inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by the prophets. You see, all the means that Saul had to inquire of the Lord had been denied him. You see, the kingdom had been taken from him. The Spirit of the Lord had left him. He now was in disgrace. He only had to live out his days to the time when he died. Then said Saul unto his servants, Seek me a woman that has a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, Well, there's a woman that has a familiar spirit at Endor. Saul disguised himself, put on some other raiment, and went with 2 men with him. And they came by night to the woman, and they said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring him up, whom I shall name unto thee. And the woman said unto him, Behold, thou knowest what Saul has done. He's cut off those that have familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die? And Saul sware to her by the Lord, saying, listen to what he says, As the Lord liveth, there shall no punishment happen to thee for this thing. He was going to do an exceedingly wicked thing, and he brings into the name of God. He says, as God lives, you will not be punished for this thing. Then said the woman, Whom shall I bring up to thee? And he said, Bring me up Samuel. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. You see, this woman, what she did, she had the ability to bring up the dead, to stand before her. Now, whether they stood before her in actual fact, or whether they stood before her in spirit, is hard to know. I should imagine it probably was just in spirit. But she was able to raise a communication with the dead in such a way that there would be a living communication, a living conversation with those that had died. The woman saw Samuel and cried with a loud voice, and the woman spoke to Saul, saying, Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul. You see, there was something about this spiritual, it was a spiritual experience. It was a spiritual experience in which, when she was in this trance, or in this state of mind in which she was able to communicate with the dead, so she received knowledge outside of all human knowledge. And as a result of that, she was able to know that he was Saul. And the king said to her, Do not be afraid, for what did you see? And the woman says, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. We don't know what this is. She's only just trying to describe it in her best words. And he said to her, What form is he of? And she said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel. He stooped with his face to the ground, and he bowed himself. And Samuel said to Saul, you see now the communication, now Samuel had been called from the dead, so Saul was able to see him and able to communicate with him. Samuel said to Saul, Why have you disquieted me to bring me up? Why have you disturbed me from my rest to bring me up? And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me, and answereth me no more, neither by prophets or by dreams. And therefore I've called thee, that thou mayest make known to me what I shall do. Then said Samuel, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy. So Saul is saying, I don't know why you're asking me, because the Lord has departed from you. So why are you asking me to come and speak to you? And the Lord has done to him as he spake by me. The Lord has rent the kingdom out of thy hand and given it to thy neighbour, even to David. And because you obeyed not the voice of the Lord, nor executest his fierce wrath upon Amalek, therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with thee, and the Lord will deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell straightway along on the earth and was sore afraid, because of the words of Samuel. There was no strength in him. He had eaten no bread at all that day and that night. So Saul had been fasting not because he was a godly man. He'd been fasting because he was afraid. He was fasting because he just was petrified about what the battle might mean for him. And so in the end, the witch of Endor is encouraged to bring him some bread and some food, and they eat, and he physically recovers. So this shows how very great was the foolishness of Saul, even after making his mind up that he will not chase David anymore. He nevertheless is so afraid that he's prepared to do the unthinkable. He's prepared to go to a witch. He's prepared to go to a medium, one who is able to communicate with the dead. And he's prepared to use those means to discover what he should do. This is a man who's desperate. He is desperate to find out what the word of the Lord is. But the word of the Lord has departed from him. Well, there we are. That's the passage for today. I trust that this is a blessing to you, and I look forward to speaking to you all again tomorrow. God bless you. Bye for now.